Guys, I'd like to introduce Frank Ruiz. He's a good friend of mine, part of the clergy. He's a mental professional. He's got many things he's involved in, but most importantly, right now, he's involved with the Salton Sea. He's with the Audubon Society for this whole area, and he will enlighten you on some of the latest on the Salton Sea and what's going on, but most importantly, how God is influencing change with the Salton Sea and restoration in more ways than one. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it over to Frank, and Frank's got we'll be done a little bit. Well, we're running a few minutes late, and then we have an amazing lunch for you. So with that said, Frank, and guys, if you're looking for more information on the biographies and the backgrounds, they are in your handouts and in your binder, and if you have other questions that you might have of Frank, see him at lunchtime as well. Okay, Frank?
Thank you, Al. Hi, all. I almost feel like walking on holy ground right here. Do we say amen to that? Amen. Do you want me to go up there? Okay. Thank you. What an amazing event this is. And thank you all for such a kind invitation to join you all. Like Al was saying, I've been wearing different hats throughout my professional career. I've been in mental health. I practiced for over 15 years. In addition, I was also a pastor, trying to combine spiritual health with mental health. And for the last 7 years, I've been dealing and I've been leading with the restoration projects at the Salton Sea, understanding the science, understanding the socio-political implication, understanding the environmental challenges, understanding all the intersectionalities happening at the sea. This is what I call a unique crisis, a generational crisis. I don't think we have ever seen something like this, but I don't think this will be the last one. I love the worship. It was amazing. It reminded me of my years when I used to live in Israel. V'adaber Elohim lebanei Israel, Shabbat Shalom. I love the spirit, and thank you all for coming together. The Salton Sea is perhaps one of the biggest challenges that we're going to be facing as a culture. The biggest challenge that we're going to be facing as a generation. There is not an easy fix. So for some of you that may hear someone saying, I have the solution, please don't listen to it. Okay. I've been in the weeds. I've been in the trenches, for the last 7 years. My organization does most of the science, for the sea, for the state and for the federal government. And we've been exploring all the different options. And honestly, it is, I find the solutions, but not the solution. And some of you probably remember the Salton Sea of the 60s, 50s, and 60s, when the Salton Sea used to be the California Riviera, when people used to come down to the sea for fine dining, golfing, boating, fishing. And if you had a property right next to one of the now areas in Sun City or one of the surrounding communities, you had already made it. But the dream became a nightmare. Why? We'll see why. I love, this text, being the salt of the earth. And I love, the fact, that I think, can't remember the name of the gentleman, but the salt needs to come out of the shaker, right? It is no purpose. It has no value to stay in the shaker. I love someone said, that we gotta use salt, from the context of flavor. It is the flavor that makes the sense. If we lose the flavor, we lose everything. And traditionally, I don't think, we have been willing, or perhaps, I should say brave enough, to come out of the shaker. Amen. And we've been behaving, and we've been acting, and we've been practicing in silos. But what I see right here, I see challenges that require godly people of faith to come to the challenge, people of faith to have a better understanding of what is at stake here. And it is not just about the birds or the wildlife. It is also about the least of these. It is also about the people that God put us all in charge of. When I read the Old Testament, the New Testament, when I look at it from the perspective of the Judeo-Christian tradition, I see God telling us to go and look after the widow and the needy and the orphan. And the South Sea is perhaps the place where you can find it all. I wanted to highlight some of the major challenges, that we face at the sea, and one of them is water, water, and water. Some of you perhaps may ask, hey, with all the rain and the snow that we had lately, wouldn't that be suffice? Wouldn't that be sufficient to solve the problem? Some of you may or may not know that the South Sea depends almost 100% from the Colorado water. And we're going into the 22nd year of drought at the Colorado River. That by 2045, we probably have lost more than 40% of the total water that the Colorado River provides from the Denver to Tijuana and from the Rockies to Mexicali. My friend, that is quite a loss. It is a major crisis. So somebody said, that life is water. And water is life. And with no water, we're going to have environmental crisis. We're going to have public health issues. We're going to have economic issues. And I predict that in the next few decades, we're going to see changes we have not seen probably in all the years that we can track back in modern history. Why? Because the environment is telling us, I am tired. Amen. You have been abusing me. You have been taking advantage of me in ways, that I cannot remain sustainable. Another challenge that I see is the cultural and social intersectionalities happening in the region. We have the highest asthma rate in the state of California. Countless families that I've talked to have kids dealing with nosebleeds and asthma and COPD. More than any other community in the state of California, more than any community in the U.S. In the wealthiest country in the world, we're dealing with some of the biggest human challenges. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the U.S. And in addition to that, the South Sea is full of salt that is creating a huge environmental crisis. As the water continues to evaporate, the salt remains in the water, elevating the levels of salinity to the point where fish will no longer be able to survive. No macroinverts are able to survive. The oxygen levels are depleting, killing pretty much every organism. This is a picture of the geographic perspective of the South Sea. Some people may call it an accident. We don't want to call it an accident. Because when we ask our brothers, Native American communities that have lived and thrived around the sea, they will tell you that the water has always been here. The Salton Sea is only the last iteration of the ancient Cahuilla Lake that used to cover areas Probably some people claim, historians believe that it used to cover from the Sea of Cortez all the way down to Palm Springs, making it the largest lake ever in history in North America. The Salton Sea is just the last occurrence of the ancient Cahuilla Lake. But what we did, we manipulated every body of water. That we broke the cycles, and the cycles are no longer able to be repeated. So the Salton Sea now only survives through the water that comes through the agricultural runoffs. We're experiencing one of the worst droughts in modern history, if not the worst. That is going to force everyone to change practices. That is going to force everyone to look at the different perspectives. That is going to force everyone to change their paradigms. That is going to force everyone to adapt, survive, or die. And this is, an image of satellite images by different agencies that track down the climate change, drought, and what we are experiencing in the Western Hemisphere is no joke. But the Salton Sea is in the context, it's connected to the Colorado River both hydrologically and politically. What is happening here? I met with the Reclamation Commissioner about a month ago, and she's asking the 7 states and Mexico to cut between 2 and 4 million acre-feet of water, more than 1/3 of the water that is provided by the Colorado River. Otherwise, the system will collapse. Otherwise, the water will not be able to go through Lake Mead, and we're not going to be able to open up our faucet and get the water that we need. In this context, I want you to look at the bigger perspective. The Salton Sea is not just a local issue, because we live in a time and age where everything is interconnected. And we gotta realize that. The environmental collapse is already happening. At the Salton Sea, we used to get over 400 different species on any annual basis, only rivaled by the delta of the Colorado River. In California, we lost over 97% of the wetlands that birds and wildlife depend on. 97%. The Salton Sea is one of the very few habitats remaining. And we're already lost. We do all the science and monitoring, and we already saw 1/3 of those species being gone. And when the bird's gone, the next is us. Birds are usually good indicators of how good or how bad your environment is. And they're leaving because the resources are no longer there. Salinity continues to spike, and our measurements shows, they are between 62 and 69 parts per thousand, more than twice of the ocean salinity. The macroinvertebrate population is declining rapidly, so even the little birds, depend on those mosquitoes and bugs, they're dying too. Dissolved oxygen is declining big time. And just as birds are connected, so are we. And we have to recognize what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to say: we live in interconnectedness. What happens to my neighbor affects me. And what happens to the Coachella Valley will affect the greater Los Angeles area and eventually everyone living in California. There are intersectionalities happening here. People are dying, people are suffering simply because we have not been able to step up to the challenge. Let me tell you something. Years ago, when I was practicing, I used to believe that environmentalists were the people that were just hugging trees and I needed to step away from those folks. But when I went through my Bible again, I saw that the first great commission, before Jesus said, "Go and make disciples," the first great commission was, protect the earth. Genesis 1, what? 26. And God made human beings. Let us make man according to our image and according to our likeness, so that they can what? And have domain over what? You know, our egotistic approach has led us believe, that we gotta have domain over earth, over creation, and we gotta do whatever we please with that. But the word in Hebrew is actually radah, which means to protect and care the way God does with his creation. And we were called, my brothers, we were called to be stewards of God's environment. And that includes the birds and the animals and everything that creeps over the earth and everything that flies over the air. We were called to be God's steward of his creation. Environmentalists, I know that when environmental movement was born, the image was, that they were chaining themselves to trees, and we wanted to stay away from them because they were the freaking liberals. And I tell you, because, that's how I used to feel. I don't want nothing to do with those liberals. I don't want nothing to do with those guys. Someone said to me, I don't want nothing to do with those Philistines. Until I realized that the ones that should have been at the front end, it should have been us, believers. Because we believe in the first commission to take care of God's creation, God's people, everything that is on earth. When I look at the Salton Sea, I look at a place of inequalities. Last night, there was a screening for a documentary that is called The Invisible Valley, which I was part of, contrasting the two different worlds. The West End with lush golf courses and nice green open areas, and dancing fountains and whatnot. And the East End of young kids playing close to open sewers. And having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and harvest the fields that put food on the table on every American, Canadians for the whole winter months. What is the calling for us? What is God's calling for a generation of Judeo-Christians that believe in God's commission? If nothing is done, this is an image that was put together by the Imperial Irrigation District, that if nothing is done, by 2042, there will be 72,500 acres of exposed playa. That you can walk 6 miles on the exposed shoreline, producing hundreds of tons of dust that can make the Coachella Valley a dust bowl. This is not an easy task. It requires people like ourselves that believe, that we have a mission. And this is in the context of, the world's major challenges. The way that we have approached environment is not sustainable, my friends. The way that we are using our resources is not sustainable, my brothers. We will no longer be able to continue this pace because the way we are abusing God's creation is not sustainable. I used to have a house with a nice pool that I decided to sell. Not just because it makes me feel uneasy having a body of water that is just evaporating year after year, but because it was really getting expensive too. And my prediction is that there is going to be a time where even having swimming pools will not be available. We're going to have to make a decision whether we use water for priorities or for luxury. We had to make a decision whether we want to continue using our resources in the pace at the rate that we're using, or become better stewards and allow our kids and our grandkids to continue being able to survive. I don't really think, this is about environmentalists. I don't really think, this is a matter of right or wing. I think this is a matter of stewards of the environment that believe that before we are actually go and make disciples, the first commission was to protect God's creation. Therefore, and go and make disciples to all nations, says the Lord. Well, let me tell you, if we do not protect the earth, there are not going to be many disciples to convert. There are not going to be many people to reach out. And the Lord said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. The way we are abusing God's creation, it is not God-like. It is not Jesus-like. And let him have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air. I used to study Hebrew under a rabbi, and he gave me one of the greatest understanding of this text. He says, Frank, the reason why we are like God, the reason why we're supposed to be like God, is because we have a quality that only human beings have, to be able to behave like God. We are the only species that is able to dominate the world the way God does. But he said, it is not about developing coercive measures. It's about doing it with grace and love. Protecting not just the least of these, but the species and animals that will never be able to voice out their own concerns. We are the voice, my friends. We are the voice not just of those people that live in the Coachella Valley. Somebody was asking me, I did an interview for 60 Minutes with Bill Whitaker. Probably some of you know Bill Whitaker from 60 Minutes. And he was asking me, Frank, why is the Salton Sea problem still lingering after so many years? And you want to know what I told him? My honest truth? I said, because we don't have the social, the political, or the economic capital to entice lawmakers to come and say, come and fix this problem. If, the Salton Sea was closer to the greater Los Angeles area or San Francisco, this problem would have been taken care of a long time ago. But as a man of faith, I also know what man can do, God can do. Do we say amen to that? Amen. But God is not going to do it alone. Who is he going to send? Are you a disciple? Yes. Do you consider yourself disciples? Yes. Do you think God will put you here for a purpose? That's exactly what I felt when I decided to leave my practice behind and embrace one of the biggest challenges that I have done in my professional career. I'll leave you with this quote. It is Frank Ruiz's quote. Before we learn how to make disciples, we have to learn how to be stewards of God's creation. Do you want me to tell you a story? A personal story? Okay, just because you insist. I want to finish with this personal story. I was dating my wife, with the woman that is my wife, about 25 years ago. And she was born and raised in Arizona, and she came to visit me, and I was in LA. So I decided to bring her to a nice Mexican place, to enjoy the food that we have in the greater Los Angeles area. And we were having a nice dinner until, my physiology called me and I had to go to the bathroom. But when you're dating someone, you don't really want to neglect them, or you don't want to leave them alone. You want to give them your whole attention. So I said, I was kind of like trying to hold it, but I couldn't do it anymore. And I said, hey, can I just leave for 1 second? She's like, sure, go take your time. So I went as fast as I could. I went inside the restroom, and when I finished my business, all of a sudden I realized, oh, wow, look at these restrooms. Smelly, nice, clean. Usually men bathrooms don't look that way, okay? Okay. So now, all of a sudden, I was like looking around, and I was the only one in there. So soon, I was like, I didn't see any urinals. So I decided to take a quick peek, and there were like 10 women waiting outside because they had seen a man. That was back then when men couldn't go into women's bathrooms, okay? So I had to create a strategy right there, and I said, what do I do right here? The beautiful lady is waiting for me, but there are 10 ladies in between. So I decided to just, put my head down and walk as fast, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know how many times I said, I'm sorry. I never told my wife until last year. We were having dinner, and I said, I'm going to reveal to you something. The man that you love went into a women's restroom, but it was all for the love for you. This is all for the love for God. What I'm doing here, and what I hope that you can, hopefully in the future, will be able to join our efforts, will also be in the name of God.
Thank you, Frank. I know that there's probably a lot of questions people have, Frank, and we see a lot of similarities with Salton Sea, with the Great Salt Lake, with Owens Lake, and there's been a lot of asthma, a lot of pollution, and it's things to come. You have been very instrumental in creating a lot of prayer groups around the Salton Sea. Bringing in, I know that Paul Cedar was one of them, Pastor Cedar, and has led a lot of congregations to pray around the corners of the Salton Sea. So I wanted to let you know that is a form, an exact great example of salt and light. And so I wanted to have you recognize how it played in with the Salton Sea, but it played in nicely, and frankly, I just can't thank you for all that you do and your leadership and your godly guidance and influence throughout the community. All right, so let's just give another hand to Frank.